Hey there, this is Hillary Black, and I just wanted to take a moment to introduce this chat that you're about to hear. This is a recording of a Clubhouse meetup that we did. It was the first episode of the Conversation Designers Club. It is a kickoff series, part one of four, and the topic that we talked about was how to become a conversation designer. And I just wanted to add that the first 10 minutes or so of this recording actually got cut off. So I just wanted to jump in and introduce our speakers and then let you know as well that we are going to be missing a couple pieces of information here. We missed the first two questions, but who we are going to hear from today is Shyamala Prayaga, who is a product owner for Digital Assistant at Ford Motor Company. As a product owner for the Autonomous Digital Assistant, she leads the company-wide Ford's Autonomous Digital Assistant innovation for voice and chatbots by owning the roadmap and overall vision and working with cross-functional teams to bring that vision to reality. She is a self-driven evangelist for UX and voice technology and recognizes the societal and cultural benefits of voice tech evolution. She possesses the insights and knowledge that comes with experience and leadership from her technical development and design roles. Our next panelist is Bobby Bryant, who is the founder and CEO of Ask DOS. He's been in real estate for over 20 years, from a mortgage broker to being a real estate broker to owning a real estate school. Bobby has been involved in each aspect of the industry. In 2015, he was one of 74 Who's Who real estate experts and the only African American named. He was interviewed and noted in the first ever Danger Report, a real estate industry specific publication commissioned by the National Association of Realtors. He's currently a Forbes contributor writing about real estate and his perspective on the real estate industry. And furthermore, he's the CEO of DOS, a voice activated real estate assistant that will radically evolve the way people search and transact property. He's better than having a realtor in your pocket. The next panelist is Austin Bedford, who is a conversation designer that is currently on the market for a conversation design job. So he offers really great perspective about searching to become a conversation designer. Austin is a Bay Area native and has experience as a UX designer for several startup companies, has taught the importance of clarity and intention in a variety of products. His fascination with language led him to become fluent in Japanese and teach English in China. Today, as a conversation designer, he uses his experience to teach NLU agents how to communicate effectively with humans. And of course, you'll hear from me, Hillary Black. I am the founder of ConversationDesignerJobs.com, co-founder, head of marketing and conversation design at Mav, and a conversational AI content creator. I have an online community of conversation designers called Conversation Designers Internet Club, an online course with UX Writers Collective. I'm a contributor to Discover.bot and Alexa.com, which are both Amazon companies, and I share design best practices there. I frequently speak and host online events for the conversation design community with organizations like Miro, UX Professionals Association, BotMock, and more. My passion is helping people just like you become conversation designers, create better bots, and get hired. And our moderator for today is Greg Bennett. He is the Conversation Design Principal at Salesforce, and he also offers a ton of interesting and really insightful commentary throughout the chat. So what I just want to add before I dive into the recording, which is about an hour long, is the questions that we missed. So the first two questions that were asked were, how do you leverage your background in your work as a conversation designer, in which Shyamala shared a lot about her experience as a user researcher. And if you look at her LinkedIn and a few of the other podcast episodes that she's been on, you can get the gist of what she would talk about there. And then secondly was, as a CEO, what do you look for in a conversation designer? And Bobby gave an awesome excerpt about a person that they just had hired. And what he was saying is that he actually found her via LinkedIn, and she had sold him before he even talked to her. So she sold herself through her experience, the way that she approached design, the examples of the verticals that she gave. And she also just really went in depth about all the different skills that she possessed that would help her on the job to become a conversation designer. So the question that we are going to start in here is, what are the key skills you should highlight on your resume when applying for a conversation design role? So this will really be a good place to kick off if you are hoping to become a conversation designer. And with that, let's get into the recording. I had the same thing for sort of building your online personal brand, which is like another thing that, I work on a lot. So you want to make sure that both your LinkedIn and your portfolio and your website are all saying the same message, and they all are trying to attract this person that doesn't even really need to meet you in order to understand your work, understand your talents, and what you're passionate about. And so to just go into like the skills specifically, I really consider it to be kind of like five different categories. So the first category is obviously the writing aspect of it. As a conversation designer, you're going to be doing a lot of writing. So whatever skills you might have from, linguistics to content writing to UX writing, and any sort of like writing skills that you have specifically when it comes to writing sort of like micro copy. So that's kind of something that, you should consider if that's a skill that you have. And then the second would be user experience. So that would be any time where you were thinking of the user, whether that's a job that actually was UX, whether it was user research, whether it was like user experience design, whatever sort of way that you're just communicating that you're advocating for the user, you're thinking of them, however you can exemplify that. And then the next is sort of like a creativity aspect. So this would be something that makes you different and your unique background. I know, we talked about this earlier. A lot of our backgrounds are very different from one another, and how you can use those skills to your advantage. Personally, I used to be a social media manager before I was a conversation designer. And that's something that, while it doesn't necessarily seem like it might be a good transition into conversation design, it's actually really great because I know how to write short things. I know how to talk to users. I know how to make engaging experiences for people, and that really helps out. And then next is your collaboration skills. So this is for like a team-based thing. So if you're going into a team, you want to make sure that you understand the process of how this actually gets developed. So are you able to collaborate with different team members? Do you know a different, agile methodology of building things? Do you understand how you can work together with multiple different stakeholders from different departments and sort of bring all of that information together? And then lastly is the tools. So this is like the more specialty things. So any sort of like prototyping tools or conversation design tools that you might use, be it Botmock, VoiceFlow, Figma, if you know any technical platforms, if you know Dialogflow, if you know how to train intents, those obviously are all things that you definitely want to include.
Thanks so much for explaining that, Hillary. And I definitely have to plug part is so key. I know that when I'm looking to hire, it helps for me to know that the candidate knows a specific set of tools, because if they fit with the tools that we're already using on my team, then that's one less thing that we have to onboard on and train around. So I think that that's great. And I love how you outlined each piece of it in those key pillars. Thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly. And the tools too, this just like goes to show that you can learn any of the tools yourself. And so that's not necessarily something that someone would need to, learn for a specific job, but knowing more and knowing a variety of them will make you more appealing to more companies.
Totally, 100%. And I think like it's something that even we as designers sometimes will forget that, oh, it's something that we just use in our everyday work. And so potentially it may not even be something that's worth mentioning, but it absolutely is. So I completely agree. For those who are just joining, I do want to reset the room a little bit. So this is How to Become a Conversation Designer, a panel featuring industry professionals ranging from those who are leading teams, those who are in product, heads of companies, from the perspective of personal brand and marketing, as well as an actual conversation designer currently in the role. And so this is a panel for us to discuss what stakeholders are looking for in conversation design candidates, but also how what that perspective looks like also from the sort of the applicant side. And as a quick reminder, we are recording this session, particularly because there's broad interest for those who do not have an iPhone to be able to listen and consume these insights. So again, if you are not comfortable being recorded, please stay in the audience when we move into our Q&A session. So we just heard a little bit from Hillary about the key skills that should be highlighted when you're applying for a conversation design role. I'm curious, Shyamala, from the perspective of the interview, what are some of maybe your go-to interview questions for a conversation design candidate?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And first of all, I love what Hillary said. That definitely sets the stage a lot. So, my questions are not very conversation design focused because, well, I can ask you what is an intent or how do you create a persona or any such kind of things, right, for a conversation design. But then those kind of things are pretty easy to know. You can just read a blog and you can just tell me. So, that does not really give me the insights on how practical you are when it comes to the conversation design in general. So what I rather do or prefer doing is doing some sort of design activities with them, and those are not necessarily related to conversation design. For example, I would just ask people like something as random as you need to redesign or you need to design a swimming pool. How would you go about it? Now this is a very vague question which I have given, so I'm absolutely looking at all the things Hillary mentioned, right? The creative thinking, or, are you collecting the right kind of requirement? And as a conversation designer, it's really, really important to actually understand all of the aspects. So when I've interviewed with these kind of questions, I have had people who would directly jump and they'll be like, well, I'll just have the swimming pool and blah, blah, blah. I'll have the XYZ features. I'll have a kid section and all of those things. So of course that's not the kind of answer I'm looking for. So then there are other kind of people who were like very, very keen on asking me the right kind of question, like, is this a new swimming pool, is this an old one, or redesign, why are you redesigning, or what is your budget, what is the timeline, and who are we designing it for? Is it for resorts or is it for some other place? So they need to collect all of these requirements. So when people start with these kind of right questions, that gives me assurance that if I give them any kind of complex conversation design space, they will be asking a conversation design applications or anything, they will be asking the right questions, because they are asking those things. So they are more detailed oriented, they are getting all of the information from me upfront before assuming and designing. And this is something I always look for, that is the person just jumping into the conclusion and designing because I have asked them to, or are they really diving deep to understand the problem and understand the scope before they do? Because as a conversation designer, there could be very simple skills like playing music, and it may seem very simple. So when I was working on the music skill with Amazon, it felt very simple. Like, well, we have to play music, but there were so many complications. Like, do we need to play music from the Amazon Music or Spotify or some other music provider? Now everything changes. Your business logic changes. So it's not just about the dialogues or the conversation itself, but how are you thinking about those business logics? Those interactions also helps. So giving a design exercise like this definitely helps me understand how this person thinks from all of the aspect.
Oh, Shyamala, thank you so much for sharing all of those insights. I think that the thing that resonates the most for me in what you said is that, particularly from the applicant point of view, oftentimes we'll get given some kind of an exercise to do before we get, into an interview, or maybe even during an interview. And at a sort of basic level, we kind of understand, well, they kind of want to see how we think. But the thing that I think that was so great about your explanation just now was that you explained from the hiring perspective and from the managerial perspective, what are the key things that as a manager I'm looking for, and how am I trying to kind of assess, your skills and your thinking and your approach through this exercise. And I think that humanizes the exercise aspect a little bit. So thank you for sharing that. This takes me to a question to Austin. So I would love, Austin, for you to bring in the perspective of folks who are actually on the other side, so not hiring but applying for the role. I Before we get into interview questions and whatnot, I kind of want to get a sense of, because you and I have talked about this a little bit previously, regarding conversation design exercises, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your thoughts on that experience and that process.
Yeah. So what's pretty common and what I've seen is a lot of take-home tests have been common with in terms of applying to a lot of conversation design jobs. And then usually they're there in the beginning of the process, writing some kind of intent, and as I think Hillary mentioned, showing instead of telling. And I think everyone's really hit the nail on the head, like kind of showing the different skills that you need or that they're looking for. But I think at a fundamental level, they're kind of looking for knowing that design, that like after several iterations, this is how you're going to prove your work. And after iteration and after doing different approaches, that you're going to arrive at an answer. You're not going to get it right on the first try. No one's going to get it perfect the first time. You want to end up with something that's beautiful but still functional, and that's going to separate the good designers from the designers that don't really know what's going on. Having that process and using structure. Usually the tests that I've gotten are take-home tests that allow, for you to somehow show your process, creating the user intent, thinking about being curious about like what's the use case, who's the audience, and also having empathy for the chatbot. Are the prompts that you're creating leading the user to complete their task, or is it too verbose? Is it not using the right tone? Are you really thinking about the user and where they're using it, when they're using it? All of these different scenarios.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think so. This does lead me to a couple of other questions, and I feel like I'm sort of falling back on my old like user research hat here, because as you were explaining that, it caused me to think of a couple additional questions that I'm curious about. The first of which is, of the exercises that you've taken, the take-home exercises, which one would you say is the best one and why that you've worked on?
To be honest, I think when Hillary or when Shyamala was speaking, I haven't gotten a test that I've loved. I think that we've all talked about how we like concepts and we want people to dive deep and not just talk about just the concepts that they know, but to really dig deep about what's the use case and is a chatbot even necessary. And I think that would better be done with not a take-home test, but having a live session, because when we're actually in the workplace, as someone mentioned, we're going to be working with different teams and we're going to be working with other team members. And I think it's really important to communicate why you're going to be making the decisions that you're making and making it digestible for other people that have different mindsets. So if you're talking to engineers, making sure that the engineers know what you're talking about. And if there's a product manager, you're able to talk about return on investment and why you're making decisions that you're making in the dialogue. And just really communicating. So in terms of actually having a take-home test that I really loved, I actually haven't had one yet, to be honest.
Thank you. And of course, the thoroughness of your answer answered my next question, which was how would you change the experience if you would? So thank you for going through that. I love the idea of having it be a more interactive experience. That does take me to another question about regarding the sort of live interview, for example. What are some questions that conversation design applicants should look out for during a conversation design interview?
Sorry, and that's me, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. I think Hillary mentioned in the beginning, and I think Bobby also mentioned as well, if you're curious about conversation design and you've done your homework about terminology and things that I guess someone would see as jargon, knowing what intents are entities and utterances, just having this in your vocabulary, I think will really help you have a conversation about conversation design. Because I think it depends on where you come from too. Like someone else mentioned before, there's a variety of different backgrounds that you can come from and enter this field. Recently, I met someone who was a professional violinist and is becoming a conversation designer. So yeah, like you can come from very different backgrounds, but I think that when it comes to communicating what's going on, you have to have that design mindset, testing, researching, and then going into design. Because yeah, if you just go straight into design, then yeah, you're probably not going to create the best experience. If you don't do testing, you're not going to have a good experience. But at the same time, like, someone who's coming from a design background like me, I feel that like I had to do a little bit more studying when it came to copywriting, and also reading books on like cognitive psychology, and yeah, listening to podcasts that talk about just the AI and technology. Like there's other places that you have to kind of adjust depending on where you're coming from. Sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think like the thing there that really stood out to me is like it's about doing your due diligence as a designer. And so that way, regardless of whatever kind of questions that come up during the interview, being able to bring that design lens. Like I love that you mentioned that you did this extra research on cognitive psychology as well, because like overall, and I think this also ties back a little bit to what Bobby was saying earlier about like looking for people who have that growth mindset. Like I know particularly, personally as a hiring manager, when I look for candidates for my team, the thing I'm looking for is an open mind and a mind and, a candidate who is willing to learn and continue to learn no matter how junior or senior they are in the role. So I think that's really great. Thank you for sharing that. Really quick to reset the room for those who have just joined. This is how to become a conversation designer with a conversation design club. This is part of a 4 to 5 week series that we're doing to kick off the creation of and celebrate the creation of the Conversation Design Club on Clubhouse. The Conversation Design Club is a club for any and all folks who are related to conversation design, whether they're just curious and trying to break into the field, they're new to conversation design, or they're a long-time seasoned conversation designer. The whole point of the club is to create a community on Clubhouse. And so keep in mind that if you're a member of the club, you can create a room just like this, and we highly encourage it. I would love to join a room that you're hosting and hear your perspective. So please, please, please be active with the club. Also, keep in mind that we are recording this session for folks who have said that they wanted to listen in and hear these insights, but aren't able to because they do not have an iPhone. So if you do not want to be recorded, please stay in the audience. And with that, we are going to continue our discussion on how to become a conversation designer. Austin, I know I've been bugging you a lot with a lot of questions, but since we've been on the thread of the applicant's perspective, I kind of wanted to get a sense for, we've asked hiring managers, like, what are they looking for in a conversation designer? But for you as a conversation designer, what are you looking for in a company when you're interviewing for a conversation design role?
Yeah, what I'm looking for in a company is I want to know at what point of the life cycle the conversation designer is being added to the conversation. I know that in the past, a lot of companies have been more technology driven and engineer focused, but I think that true collaboration takes, the engineers, the product managers, and the designers. So that's something that I would definitely want to ask if I was interviewing a company. And I want to know what the typical day looks like. Hillary also, or someone mentioned, I forgot actually who mentioned it, but yeah, what technology is being used? Like, have I already touched that technology? Is it more visual focused, like something like Bot Society, Blockmark, or is it more like Dialog Flow or Raza? What deliverables what deliverables do people share across teams? I think all these are very good questions to ask because you can see how the company communicates at its current state. So yeah.
Got it. Thank you. I think I'm also curious, like, what about company culture, company values? Anything around that you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I was about to ask that. I was going to ask I could ask the room a question.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Yeah, because I wanted to ask everyone, because this room and the clubs, I think they're awesome, and I was going to ask the room, why does the room think it's important to have an inclusive community when it comes to voice and design? I was thinking about this a lot last night, and without getting really too deep into it, I was thinking like there's nothing more personal than like the way that we communicate. Whether that's the the way that you dress, their style, whatever, like that stuff is secondary to the way you communicate. And there's actually even history to the way you communicate, like whether that's your family, your environment. And yeah, I guess like as a conversation designer, I think it's really important that we have a diverse candidate of conversation designers, because the NLU is gonna have to like basically eventually understand everyone. And like we don't want to have the whole AI teaching people how to talk to it. We want to have it so that it understands us as human beings. And as human beings, we're really diverse. And I could talk about this forever, but I'd love to get everyone else's opinions.
I'll jump in that just quickly. Bobby Bryant here. No, great question, Austin, and it's important to my team as well. I have a very diverse team. I was very meticulous in needing and wanting that, because the last thing we want to do is create a biased assistant, that thinks one way, that perceives things one way, that responds and reacts in just a certain type of way. But how do we create with the team that's empathetic, that's sensitive, that understands different cultures, because we represent that, and we're able to convey that message through our assistant, but also being concise in those responses, when necessary. But no, it's extremely important. And I think that if any team really, really wants to scale their development, if any company really believes in diversity, that they'll take that initiative head on, to ensure and make sure that the user, the consumer, feels and can tell that attention to detail was taken in mind and considered.
I love that. I love that. And thank you so much, Austin, for bringing this question, because inclusivity is so close to my heart and soul and what I do every day. It's not just about the company and, what members do we include in our team when we talk about diversity and inclusivity. But I try to also adopt inclusivity in my research. I try to bring in people with who have disability or different demographics, because that definitely helps me also to understand the product point of view. So it's not just with the NLU aspect which you said, but also understanding, like, does this conversation work well with a particular user set or not, or what kind of other, and especially with the kind of blend or the work I am doing, right, with the autonomous vehicle and the conversation design. It kind of really makes more sense for me to be thinking about those together. Like, okay, in the car, if how does this work with the multimodal experience or stuff like that. So definitely, I love what you said about inclusivity, and we should be thinking about it as often and as frequently as possible.
I completely agree. I mean, I think for me, particularly because my academic background is in sociolinguistics, I inherently cannot separate language from culture and expression of identity. The two of those, given the data and the research that's been done in sociolinguistics, are inherently and intricately intertwined and frankly inseparable. And so, Austin, I completely 100% agree with what you were saying about how we shouldn't have to force users to adapt or modify their language, their dialect, the way that they express their conversational style when they're talking to a particular product. It's almost like you're trying to sort of force someone to, wear a piece of clothing that they don't want to wear. You know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily, whether it's because it doesn't match their style, or it fits a little too tight, or it's too big, or whatever. If you have to modify the way that you talk just to get this product to work, it's certainly an imposition. And so for me, particularly at Salesforce, it's the beating heart of our work in conversation design.
Cool. Yeah. Please.
Hillary, you want to chime in?
Yeah, and I totally agree too. And I think like Austin, it really is our responsibilities as the conversation designers and not just as the companies. Like it's great to ask a company when you're interviewing there, you know, what do they believe and what are their beliefs and how we can create more accessible and more inclusive experiences. But it's really it comes down to us as the conversation designers. Like we have this duty to make sure that we are not being biased and that we're not creating experiences that are influenced by certain things. And that might come down to where we live and where, you know, like what our culture is like around us and how old we are. And I think there's so much that we have to be paying attention to, both from like a research perspective and then just considering the localization of your experience. And there's just so many factors that we kind of have to be thinking about at all times. And I think, you know, of course it's going to come down to the company, but at the end of it, it's kind of like us doing it.
Completely agree. Yeah. And just on that point, like, yeah, because you were mentioning us, and I want to let everyone know that's in the room that the community, I believe, is super welcoming. I've reached out to many different people, and I'm sure we're going to talk about resources and stuff later towards the end of the talk. But yeah, like if you hear someone on a podcast or you see a YouTube video, Hillary has some YouTube videos. Let's definitely go out and check those out. But yeah, everyone's like super welcoming, and yeah, just send a message and like ask questions because there are a lot of people that are out there to answer them. So yeah.
I think that's awesome advice. And thank you, Austin and Hillary, for sharing. I don't want to overly impose questions. I do have a few more questions left that I'd like to ask the panel, but this is going in such a wonderful organic direction. So we've invited a couple folks up on the stage. Please continue to raise your hands. I'm going to see if I can get through these last few questions and then open up the discussion because I love where this is going. So the next question I have really is actually for Bobby. Speaking of questions, what kinds of questions should candidates ask you when they're interviewing for a conversation design role?
You know, and that's a good question. I think about the conversational designer that I just brought on board. She did, and rightfully so, wanted to understand, you know, how many women that we had on our team, the diversity of our team. That was pretty cool. But also, I think that asking about the vertical, you know, asking whoever you're talking to. In my case, I may be the you know, the founder of the company, the CEO. But why? She asked me, so why are you passionate about real estate? Granted, that's your background, but she wanted me to articulate that, which was different, but I appreciated it. My theory, my thesis, you know, what do we believe? What's my ideology about, you know, some of the things we talked about here about conversation designers? You know, what's the ideal conversational designer to me? What was my expectations? For example, my team and I, you know, because we do take a multimodal approach, we're a mobile first solution. You know, we just came to, with her help, by the way, decided that that we want our responses to be 12 seconds, which equates to about 25 words or less. We don't want it to be long-winded. That will start lulling people to sleep. To be very meaty and concise, and anything over than that, let's take a different approach. I would like people to ask, how much authority do you know? How much authority do they have, or will have, you know, in decision making? I'm a big fan of Steve Jobs. I don't bring on smart people to tell them what to do. I bring them on board to tell us what to do, especially when it comes to conversational design. That's what we were looking for. I think I heard Austin say this. What platform, you know, are we building on? You know, is it custom? Is it agnostic? You know, I think that could potentially matter. It does matter. You know, I think those are some good questions that I would probably ask. We have to keep in mind to ask the questions, even if they feel like they're the hard questions, because the company may be interviewing you for an opportunity, but you're also interviewing them for an opportunity. Make that opportunity fit with and for you. Don't go in biting your tongue, because if it's not a good fit for you, and if it doesn't feel good for you and to you, and if you don't have some degree of creativity, then you're not going to be happy anyway, and you're not going to stay there long anyway. And so ask the hard question. This is a young industry, and everybody's learning, and they want to learn from you. And so I'm very objective during my interviews, because I want them to tell me what they think.
Bobby, you just gave me goosebumps. That is awesome. And I completely agree with everything that you said. I mean, long term, if folks are thinking about this as a career, then yeah, you don't want to force yourself, into a role, like you said, that, potentially is part of an organization that doesn't feel like a fit. The next question yeah, awesome. The next question I have is for Hillary. Hillary, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some key resources that people can use to find a conversation design role. Austin had mentioned that you have YouTube videos. I'd love to learn more, and for the audience to learn more about the resources that you have.
Yeah, so thanks, Austin, for shouting out my YouTube channel. But in terms of finding a job, so conversationdesignerjobs.com is definitely the place that you should go. That's the conversation design specific job board that I have created. So it's both for companies to find the best candidates and for you to find a job. So we have, we post jobs there regularly, and you can also sign up for email alerts to receive jobs as soon as they go up. And then aside from that, LinkedIn is an amazing place to both like network with people so that you're top of mind when they are hiring, but then also to, of course, look for jobs. A lot of people are posting jobs there. And so I just encourage people always to add people and just say, hey, I'm looking for a job, would love to stay up to date with your content. Like, feel free to add me and say that. And I post jobs. So you can see those there. And then there's other communities as well, aside from LinkedIn. So I have a Facebook community that is called Conversation Designers Internet Club. And there's a lot of jobs that are posted there, but there's also a lot of people who are looking for jobs, who want to get feedback on their portfolio. We post a lot of like challenges and just different ways that you can improve your skills as a conversation designer, network with other people, and just find a job. And there's a few other communities as well on like Slack and on Discord, and there's Women in Voice. And so I definitely encourage people to join as many and just like start up a conversation. People are very, very welcoming. And this, of all industries I've worked in, this is by far the most engaged and the most welcoming community ever. And so even if you might feel like you're a competitor to someone, chances are they would love to talk to you. And so just put yourself out there, make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, and just network as much as you can.
I have to definitely plus one that, Hillary, regarding how friendly the industry is. I mean, one of Salesforce's biggest competitors is Oracle, and one of like my favorite colleagues in conversation design is a designer at Oracle. So, I mean, I think that, right now the community is so welcoming, and as a sort of budding community, I love that, you and others are doing this work to bring the community together in a collaborative fashion. Thank you so much for that. So I'm down to the last question we have for my pre-prepared questions, and this one is for Shyamala. So take us home, Shyamala, before we open up to the audience. Key resources for learning more about conversation design as a field. Could you share some?
Absolutely. So, there are two things here, right? I would say, first of all, that you cannot learn swimming by just looking at some videos and saying, yes, I aced it. You need to get into the water and you need to learn how to swim. Conversational design is exactly the same way. You have a lot of great resources out there which will give you that theoretical knowledge. But in order to really dive into this and become a conversational designer, you need to test out the voice application, create your own projects, and do all sorts of things. So there are a lot of resources, including my own podcast called The Future is Spoken, where I bring in experts from different industries and speak about the different aspects of conversation design, the industries, the use cases, and all. And I also have my own voice interaction design course through the Digital Assistant Academy, which I founded last year because I found the exact gap of, well, we have a lot of theoretical knowledge, but not a lot of practical, or not a lot is going on. So if you want a more structured kind of learning, of course, doing a course like that could be your way of going, which is a very intense 24 weeks kind of course. Otherwise, there are a lot of additional courses. Hillary has her own course, right? And there are many other lot of YouTube videos and lot of blogs and articles and all of those things. So definitely those are all great. But if you really want to dive deeper, join the Open Voice Network, be a volunteer, become an ambassador, be part of these kind of things where you'll get real work and real experience working with the industry experts. So yeah, I would say like there's a lot to do here, a lot of information, and I don't want to overload you with a lot of additional resources.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shyamala. I think that was a great answer, and I love that you shared resources. The recording of this will be available on Hillary's website, I believe, and likely the rest of the panelists will also make it available through their own channels as well. And it'll be another resource for folks to be able to engage and learn more. I do want to sort of double click on that and say, yes, this is being recorded. So for folks who are coming on stage, we are now going to open things up to the audience and have questions, but do keep in mind that we are recording the session. So if you do not consent to being recorded, unfortunately, we won't be able to host you on stage. So with that, we're going to go in order. Our first audience member who has come on stage to ask a question is Sophia. Sophia, feel free to ask your question and take it away.
Hello, thank you so much. I just want to quickly say I really appreciated the conversation around the need for diversity and inclusion. Cut for myself, coming from a government public sector background, something that I would consider in the conversational design piece is making sure that the content actually works well for people who have English as a second or third language, because often they might use the chatbot to get the information that they need, and they'll need to like copy and paste that into some kind of translation tool. So even constructing the English content into a way that is easily translatable is just something that I'm thinking about. So thank you for that. The question that I have is when you talked about the need for collaboration, have any of you ever hit roadblocks with your corporate communications folks in the way that you need to design the conversation for the chatbot?
I love that question, and I can take that, being in this very complex world of autonomous vehicle. So yes, there are a lot of bottlenecks which you will hit, especially if you're working with a large organization, probably not in the small organization as much. So right from when I was working on the Sync 4 voice assistant for the Marquee and Ford F-150, right from the point of what personality should we have, and it should not completely be off from the Ford brand which we have, to thinking about wake up word, like should we have hey Henry as our wake up word, or should we have a human name instead of hey Ford, or something like that. Like these kind of small decisions, these may seem small, but these are really big decisions, and required a lot more sign off from different stakeholders. And there was a lot of pushback and a lot of things, because when we thought like we will have Henry as our especially there were two things to it, right? We didn't want it to have a female voice assistant, but at the same time we wanted to give the users some sort of different wake up word and not the vehicle. So from that standpoint also, when we started having the conversation, the internal team was all on board, like, yeah, Henry sounds like a great thing, and he was a visionary and all of those, so we are reflecting the brand furthermore. And then when we started having this discussion with the communications and the marketing and branding team, they were like, well, he's a visionary, do we want to portray him as an assistant for someone doing stuffs? So those kind of gaps will definitely come. So we had to think from those aspects, we had to make trade-offs, like what we think is right. So there will be these kind of things. And in the AV world, it's completely different, and there's a lot more complication even in terms of the branding and the copy or the conversational components we are thinking about, like how do we even decide those kind of things. So there's battle every day, I would say, with these stakeholders like legal or communications or marketing, because there has to be a blend and a balance between what you design and what the overall brand stands for.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I also want to add
Oh,
that
yes.
to that a little bit. So not necessarily from the corporate communication standpoint, but also I've worked a lot with legal teams, just to like in a consulting capacity, and a lot of it will come down to too that you can do a little bit of education to them. So if you're getting a lot of pushback from the legal team, it could be potentially that they don't really understand what you're trying to do. So a lot of times I found that creating, video prototypes or just explaining to them and going through exactly what we're trying to accomplish with this will help to paint a better picture than just saying, hey, we want to open it up to say all of these things or to use these certain tones that might not be within their comfort level. And hopefully they can become a little bit more flexible. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to, meet in the middle somewhere.
Thank you so much.
I love that you brought up legal, Hillary, because I think that's something that oftentimes we'll run into with, particularly for customer service use cases. You know, I remember having a discussion once where some folks were saying, well, we can't actually say the word help because we can't ensure that it's actually going to be something that's going to get completed. And so maybe we need to use the word assist instead, and being able to balance the sort of legal requirements. Sometimes legal will just give you a phrase that's like, you have to say this. Like you have to say, this call is being recorded for quality assurance purposes or something like that as part of the dialogue. And even though it might sound a little crusty and break with the voice and tone of the bot, again, like meeting in the middle like that, like just like you said, I think is a huge piece of this. So thank you, Shyamala and Hillary, and thank you, Sophia, for the question. Hi, Anne. Would love to hear your question.
Hi. Hi, Greg. So I'm sitting here smiling because I was thinking, okay, I wasn't going to talk about what we were just talking about, but I could have a lot of examples of that too. Absolutely, Sophia. There's tons of examples of that where you have to deal with the other team, like Hillary said, legal and all these kinds of things, especially depending on the industry vertical, right? In health and finance in particular. And apologies if my signal is poor, because I think it probably is. I just wanted to point out that one thing that I always look for if I interview people for conversation design jobs, assuming it's a voice design, I always want to make sure that I can see that people think about sound and voice and not just about text, or rather I should say, depending on what you're writing for, what you're creating content for, you have to have an appreciation for the medium, right? So that's what I like to get into. And it's almost like if I give somebody a design exercise, I almost don't really care if they get it sort of in my mind right or wrong. I just want to hear how they got there.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Anne. I think I completely +1 everything that you said. Modality is so, so important. All right. So next we have John.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me up on the stage. Up to this point, we've been talking about large organizations and jobs. I want to kind of broaden that out to contractors and also people in other companies that are looking at conversation design as a new growth opportunity. I mean, we do podcasts. That's what we're about. We also write audio fiction and identified characters as some that we want to build. So, sorry, I just finished working out. But fundamentally, what is your advice for dealing with companies and contractors who want to do conversational design?
So I just hired a contractor who is a conversation design. So my approach is the same. When I'm looking at from the experience standpoint, when I'm looking at what they will bring, because I don't know how it is with other companies, but here it's a very high responsibility kind of thing, regardless of whether they are full time or whether they are contractors. So I had the same kind of questions to them, and I would also expect them to answer the same kind of thing. So see, it's not about full time or contractor for me. It's about what Bobby was saying, like will this person be successful in this role, and does this person feel this role is fit for me or not? So it's the same thing, doesn't matter. And I don't like tagging it as full time or part time or contractor or anything. It's a job which the person needs to feel satisfied about or happy about, because they have to do constant interaction. So I would expect them to ask me the same kind of questions what I would expect any person to ask me.
Okay, very good. Because we're coming into this, I'm late career, so basically we're looking at, well, we got qualified through Soul Machine's writers program to basically just get literate on how to develop these types of charts and graphical programs, and then be able to, I guess, translate intents into Excel. So that's the basic literacy. But eventually, how would you see yourself working with media companies in general? I mean, let's just not talk about at the project level, but also on a strategic level. Say that they develop a very popular character that can also be applied in a conversational setting to help somebody get something done. How do you see that type of evolution happening in your various industries?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Hillary. You got it.
Yeah, sure. So I just want to say specifically about the avatars that you mentioned. So I think that is becoming a much more popular thing. Like one of my customers, they just are like a mortgage company, but they actually wanted to create an avatar specifically for their bot. And they developed, this entire story for this character that previously did not exist before they were experimenting with automated SMS, which is what we do. And so I think that we're going to see a lot more popularity with that. And that might be where these sort of outside media companies might be coming in with that. Or someone wants to, create one for an existing persona that they have within their organization. But I think, and that's just speaking, I guess, for chat. I'm sure for voice, there is a lot more wide range of possibilities in terms of what people want to do, from branded sound and from all of these different media companies that have all of these great skills that a company, especially if it's a startup, they don't have that capability in-house. So it's great to be able to partner with people to do that sort of thing.
Thank you very much. I'm done speaking.
+1 to everything that Hillary said. And thank you so much for your question, John. And welcome to the stage, Marlinda.
Hi, I'm loving everything that I'm hearing about how to become a conversation designer. My question is, how does someone in this role show their value on the job after they've gotten the job? Like, what do you measure and look for? How can a conversation designer show their impact and velocity within the organization?
So I'll jump on that. So this is Bobby. I know with us, what's going to, it's an ongoing job. So it's not like it's front end loaded or something like that, right? You may start off with a subset of what you think the client is going to ask, the user is going to ask, and then it evolves, right? You have to start A/B testing and paying attention, and but with us, in regards to the real estate domain, north, south, east to west, every crack and crevice, of the country, there are going to be people that are going to ask different questions differently. In Houston, where we're based out of, we don't have basements. We don't have deal with radon issues, and so you get to another part of the country, they have their own issues with real estate. So what we start doing is everything that DOS is not able to answer, we capture everything. So it's an ongoing job to create that content and to capture and try to cipher through. And hey, is that a good question that we should answer? Or what, no, or how do we even answer a question, because we're domain specific, right? We're not a general solution like an Alexa or a Siri or et cetera. And so, how do you respond accordingly? So I look at conversation design as it will continuously evolve because people evolve, and the content and the questions that they're going to be asking. I think good conversational designers are well positioned to be a pillar of that company, as long as they plug in and continue to design and evolve with that company.
I agree. I mean, I think that it's certainly something that isn't a constant, that, I think that as a field, conversation design continues to evolve, and that the requirements at the company might also evolve with them. And so that sort of skill measurement, I think, is something that is the sort of fluid and fluctuating piece. I think the constant piece that is sort of what I look for as a manager, and how to sort of evaluate the velocity and the impact of conversation designers on my team, really is are the stakeholders that they're working with getting what they need out of that conversation designer? Are they getting, clear communication? Are they being consistently updated with progress? Are they clear on what the conversation designer's vision is for where the experience should go and why? And are they receiving the design assets in a timely fashion according to those deadlines? And so there's that sort of like basic, like Scrum level piece of the velocity. I think what's also important is to sort of accurately measure for a given designer what their capacity is, because one of my biggest concerns is burnout. I don't want, my designers to burn themselves out trying to get everything done. It's really important to measure, okay, what can each designer, realistically handle given the scope of the area that they're covering at the company, and then drawing a hard line in the sand and saying, okay, this is what this designer can cover, and anything over that should be a discussion about, potentially adding resources to the team so that we can get it done. Additionally, I would say that like a lot of it also has to do with my, my sort of discussion with that particular designer, their own career goals. So let's say that there's a designer who really wants to grow in the thought leadership direction of things. Okay, so let's sit down and evaluate what are the steps that you need to take in order to get to where you want to go. Maybe that means you take a public speaking training course, or maybe it means that you publish a blog post or do an interview of some kind. But setting those realistic goals in place to incrementally move that designer toward a goal, and then just measuring the extent to which they follow through on those goals. And then of course there's designers who are like, you know what, I'm not so hot on the thought leadership stuff. I'd rather do this instead. I'd rather maybe invest more in creating internal tools or promote things internally through this mechanism. So I think a lot of it also has to do, again, with the designer's individual personal career goals as well. All right. Guess I killed the conversation with that one. Thanks for your question, Marlinda. Claire, welcome to the stage.
Oh, thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank you guys for hosting this room. I've been really enjoying it so far, and really enjoying everybody's questions so far. I might have a very practical question, but I thought I'd just drop it in anyway. I've been in conversation for about 2 years now, and I don't have a portfolio outside of my LinkedIn. And so I heard, I think it was Bobby mentioned the importance of a portfolio, and I was wondering, when you look at one of these, like what is something that really stands out to you? Like what was a portfolio that had something that really stood out to you?
Great question. When I saw her portfolio, what stood out to me was again the range. She attempting to demonstrate the range of her experience, the variety in it. When she was able to say, I work in these particular industries, she named automotive, retail, and a few others. She showed examples of that. you know, in terms of being specific, although she didn't mention real estate. I saw during our conversation, that was one of my questions that I wanted to deep dive in. And the cool thing about real estate is we all, one way or the other, have to deal with real estate. We live somewhere, right? And so there's an understanding of what that looks like. But I just like her talking about her skill, her, you know, vividly about that, simply about that, showing it, the imagery. She just didn't talk. She showed, you know, her work and what she worked.
Course at Voice Tech Global.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking of, okay, how do I build a portfolio? Apart from, of course, going to Shyamala because she is absolutely wonderful, or Hillary because she's also absolutely wonderful. Voice Tech Global also offers a great course that kind of, well, boot camps you. Like in 6 weeks, you do a full-blown product design and you get all the artifacts that show your thinking processes, the steps that you take to do your user research, inclusive design, stuff like that. And people ask me, Micah, why on earth are you taking that course? Because you're senior, right? And then I'm always like beginner's mind. There's always something to learn. And every day, if you start as a beginner, you also spare yourself the kind of despair of feeling like you're not good enough, because you're learning and you're learning from your learning. And that's just the most wonderful experience that anyone can have. Another thing that I'm not sure whether it was mentioned yet, but Voice Lunch is another great resource for beginning conversation designers. It's a global community of weekly meetups on Zoom. And it's basically ranging from anything from conversation design to really highly technical developer meetups and anything in between. They're a great and welcoming community. So yeah, make sure that you oh, actually this Monday, there's a great one with Bruce Ballantyne, who's like a voice UX guru. He's like one of the pioneers, and he's going to share some insights in product design. I guess I'll just be quiet for a while because I really need to kind of recover, but I didn't want to say no to Greg inviting me on stage, considering that he's been kind of mentoring me for the last 2-3 hours. So thank you so much.
Oh gosh, I mean, thank you for joining us on stage, Micah, and sharing those wonderful gems. I can assure you that you are as coherent and brilliant as ever, even this late at night and after all the work that you've done today. And I should share for the room, Micah shared her presentation, and I had the wonderful honor of being able to witness and see it, and it was awesome. I feel like I can go learn to play a guitar. So thank you. Thanks, Micah. All right. And Rob, welcome to the stage.
Hey there. Thanks for having me up. I just had a question for the panel that was around multimodal conversation design. It feels like we've got a lot more and more devices that support multimodal conversation interactions, and a lot more of what's being created is multimodal. Are you seeing candidates, you know, from the business side, are you seeing candidates with a multimodal skill set in conversation design, bit of the UX side as well as the language side, or and from the business side, are you looking for candidates that have a bit of experience on multiple modalities?
That's a great question. You know, what I would say is it doesn't matter, honestly. If you know how to solve a problem, if you have strong interaction skills, regardless of the modality, you will succeed. So it's not that, well, if you come from this background, then you will succeed. So you need to have some UX background, or you need to have some linguistics background to get into this, right? Those are good. I can tell you one thing. You can learn the functional skill sets, like how to use a tool or how to design an interaction and all of those things. But you cannot learn to a lot of extent the non-functional skills required, like problem solving, collaboration, or the deep dive mindset or the growth mindset. If you have that right mindset, regardless of what you do, you will succeed. So that's what I look for. I don't look for a specific platform or a tool or any such experiences. But yes, you need to bring the right mindset.
So agree on that, Shyamala. Here.
I agree as well. And I mean, I think that I don't know that I specifically seek out folks with experience in multimodal conversation design, just because at the moment Salesforce is focusing primarily on chat. But it is something that I like because it's about thinking holistically about the experience, which is agnostic essentially of the surface. I think that, you know, as users continue to adopt more surfaces in their day-to-day lives, whether that is in, you know, their personal life or in their work life, that it will certainly be something that you know, Salesforce would take into account. And so for our product work, I think that, you know, if we're thinking, you know, as someone who's thinking about conversation design constantly toward the future, it's something that I like to keep in mind as I look at candidates, but it's not an absolute requirement for me.
I do also have to say, so I don't personally hire, but I have job boards, so I see a lot of job descriptions. And I will say that a lot of companies are trending towards looking for that as multimodal, but it's more of a preferred qualification than a requirement. So it's a lot of like people kind of trying to figure out what would work best for them. And I think, of course, it's not a skill that can hurt you. And so if you do have both of those skills, definitely make sure that you talk about them. But I think that it is a lot of jobs are trending towards either being chat focused or being voice focused, but there always is a mention of that. And so I'm not too sure if it's they're mentioning it because they want to move there in the future, because that might be where their team is going, or if they are actually doing that right now.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate the kind of the views from your different vantage points on the industry there. I imagine if that is the case, Hillary, then, you know, the next wave of conversation designers we see in the industry could be people converting across from UX design because they have that kind of that part of the skill set they're bringing with them.
Absolutely. If I can briefly chime in, there's one thing that, because I come from a linguistics background and I worked with more like graphical and visual oriented UX designers quite a lot before I turned into the conversation design area. And what I do notice is that, especially for open intent-based systems, it takes a bit of a mind shift to get used to the fact that you don't have like fixed user input in your interaction design. So the way your conversation or your interaction patterns are flowing depends on the input of the user in a much more random and haphazard way than you'd have when you have like a graphical interface with buttons and affordances and stuff like that. So that's something to take into account, I guess, but also to train on, because this is basically about knowing how to leverage the effectiveness or the principles of human conversation. And just like visual UX patterns, you also have like conversational UX patterns. Robert Moore, of course, IBM, he wrote the book on that. So kind of switching into that mindset might take some adjustment, some getting used to, but it's so exciting once you get in there and get the hang of it.
Yeah, that's a really great point. There is a very different mental model to how the design functions.
Yeah,
appreciate
the good thing is though, Rob, that you already know how to do it because you talk. We all talk with each other. It's just making the patterns more explicit and kind of manageable and workable.
And this is Bobby. I'll add one little blip to this, Rob. Your question is, it's interesting. I look at multimodal. You know, it's interesting. Our entire team thinks this way. It's not that it's one particular person, right? It's a belief of our team when we think of the multiple sensories of people and what is the best way to communicate. Again, we're talking about buying homes, right? So there's a touch screen, there's the pictures and everything. You know, how should we engage the person? If they start with us talking, we talk back, right? If they text their utterance, their question, then we'll text back. But could they mix it up? Should the phone vibrate? Should we do certain things? Should the image drop down? You know, you're right. So when we start talking multimodal, it's a different thought process, right? And because what we are in the pursuit of doing is as much as possible, as best as possible with this device, is to communicate as perfectly as we can to a message, an idea, or information that the user is attempting to extract. And I think what the industry is doing collectively is in a pursuit of correcting itself, because I think we've realized that the initial splash of just the speaker, I think a lot of people realizing, okay, to really take this to the next level, we do have to have some variation of whatever multimodal means to you. And so I think that I think it was Greg who mentioned it earlier, that I do like the guy and gals who think that way. They just, the creativity is at another level. So I would surely encourage, if there is a possibility to probably add value to yourself, try to seek out those experiences. Again, that's just via my opinion in my vertical that we're developing right now, Rob.
Thank you for sharing that, Bobby. So we're getting close, and thank you, Rob, also for that great question. I know we're getting close to the end of time here, but out of consideration for folks who are maybe very new to the field of conversation design, I was wondering if someone on stage would be willing to define or explain what multimodal conversation design is.
So yeah,
And then it became very quiet.
no. Actually, I was driving and I was thinking maybe someone will do that. But yeah, let me answer that. So when we talk about multimodal, so if you look at Alexa speakers, right, like the smart speakers which we have, they are more voice first kind of approach where you do not have a screen and the input is voice, the output is voice. But then that does not work for everyone, and that is why multimodal, like Bobby mentioned, there are some use cases where voice first does not make sense. And for those kind of use cases, multimodal is the experience, which means that your input could be voice or touch, and your output could be a combination of two. So, for example,
Ooh, Shyamala, I think we lost your audio. And I really wanted to hear those examples. But I also get that you're driving, and so please be extremely safe, because I'm a little concerned. But thank
If you
you.
like, I can add some, Greg.
Run with it, Micah.
Yeah, like, well, actually, in the capstone project that I created for the course, it's about a music app that starts out with a mobile app where you can learn to play the guitar. But it's highly visual. So when you just start out, this is kind of a challenge, because of course you have to kind of integrate your hand movement, your hand-eye coordination. You have to listen, you have to look at your sheet music or whatever. So that's why I decided to design a voice first or an audio only kind of focus mode, where you basically switch to the to just, playing by ear and doing a lot of call and response and listen and repeat exercises. And to make it more kind of sensory aware, I also kind of included a haptic metronome on the smartwatch. So that's yet another mode. So you switch from visual plus audio to audio only to get really kind of the focus that you need with a bit of haptics. And once you're done, you go back again to your mobile app where you have every kind of sense available. And the good thing, the great thing about multimodal design is that it really allows for inclusive design as well, because not everyone can use every mode that you offer. For instance, if you have like a physical impairment that doesn't really allow you to use your arms a lot, then of course voice is wonderful. But if you use voice and then you have to go to an app and finish a process by pressing a button, well, obviously that's not going to work. So you have to kind of take that stuff into consideration. Like, who am I unconsciously missing out on if I design for just this one modality? And how can I solve that by perhaps including others? So yeah, that's also the fun part of multimodal design, I guess.
Thank you for sharing that, Micah. And Shyamala, I hope you're okay. You said you were driving, so I see you
Yes,
back in the
yes, yes.
room.
No, no, no.
Oh,
I was all fine. Actually, I think I was going through this bad connection zone. So I
okay.
shut off. I don't know
What a relief.
what.
I was so worried. Okay,
No problem.
great. Thanks so much, everyone. So we are at time. I want to extend a huge thank you to all of our panelists, Bobby, Hillary, Austin, Shyamala, to the audience. Thank you, Micah and Rob, and everybody else who's asked, Sophia, everyone who's asked questions. Next week, we will have the second part of the series, which will be called Flavors of Conversation Design. And that's going to be a panel about folks who come from various backgrounds in conversation design and how they approach conversation design across markets, across modalities, across surfaces, where they'll discuss a little bit more about methods and how they approach this. So tune in next week, same time, same place. And again, thank you for joining, and feel free to start your own room for the Conversation Design Club. We welcome the community at large. Thanks again, everyone.